welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. It's been 33 hours and counting since IT searches on offices of the BBC continue. As with yesterday, today also the searches were dubbed an attack on free speech and symptomatic of a dictatorial state. But the funny thing is that the same people who are talking about this IT survey as some kind of a witch hunt either remain oblivious to or are silent on certain facts. Facts of how the BBC has been investigated for quote-unquote industrial level tax evasion in their own country, the UK. So it's not as if it's a new or terribly Indian and dictatorial thing to happen in the first place. So let's begin by taking a look at what exactly has happened in the UK. BBC employees basically stood accused of not paying their taxes at the source. They were employees who were shown as freelancers, which the UK found was a way to evade taxes. News presenters were probed and eventually found guilty of the charges as well. And it is pretty much the same charges of tax evasion and under-invoicing for which the BBC is currently being surveyed in India. Yes, these are not charges that so far have been proven right, but have such investigations taken place elsewhere and found to be correct? Absolutely yes. What then explains that the very basic survey right at the outset has already been dubbed Vendetta?
Well, when it suited BJP during emergency, their leaders used to praise BBC. In fact, now the leaders have quoted in his book that he used to listen to BBC radio while in jail in emergency and then tell his BJP, then Jan Sangh or whatever party they belong to about what's happening in India. So now we see that these raids are happening. But I'm sure that the BBC will continue to show the truth to the people. The timing is absolutely wrong, and that is why the Press Club and the Editors Guild have issued the right statement about condemning these raids.
It is not only affecting the freedom of press. There will be no media in this country. Media is already controlled by them. I'm sorry to say, media cannot raise their voice. If they raise their voice, their management will just cut their service within 24 hours. This is their controlling power.
Because of the documentary,
something, speech will be golden or speech will be silver. The silence is better. Whatever I am speaking, you can guess.
3 quick points. 1, this has no bearing at all with what BBC writes, reports, or puts out. 2, BBC faces similar charges, allegations, and proven charges in the UK. It's home country. 3, if the government wanted to be vindictive, if we wanted to be vindictive, and if we wanted to go after the BBC or any other news outlet for writing against the Prime Minister or the government, we would have done it at any point of time. And especially the BBC, it could have been targeted anytime after 2014.
Now, the irony of this criticism becomes even more acute when one considers that a lot of these parties who today are speaking up for freedom of media haven't just gone after their own critics in the past, but in fact have clamped down on the media itself in their own state. Leave that aside. Some of these parties, like the Congress, have even criticized specifically the BBC, when they were in power. So how does their criticism square off now? And more importantly, if it is okay for the UK to follow processes and law during tax investigations, then how is it not equally legitimate in India as well?
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
All right, joining us on the debate, Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of BJP, Riju Datta, spokesperson of TMC, Tehseen Poonawala, political analyst, Dr. Naval Kishore, spokesperson of the RJD, national spokesperson of the RJD. But my first question is to Adit Kothari, founder member of the Indic Society. Adit, can you please start by telling us what was exactly the tax investigation against the BBC in UK, and eventually were they found guilty?
Certainly. So the BBC has been subjected to this sort of tax scrutinization in the UK for a very, very long time. Essentially, they had to shell out about 8.3 million in terms of tax liabilities in 2017, and they had to set aside an outstanding of about 12.2 million pounds in 2019 for a future tax liability. Now, these were essentially on the basis that they were using individuals as disguised employees and setting them up as contractors working through private limited companies, thereby reducing the exposure of tax. And that, in a sense, the BBC was able to evade about 14% tax contribution towards the national insurance. And this report was essentially filed by the CAG in the UK, which is the National Audit Office, and they essentially audit the public spending of institutions. And this was essentially submitted to the British Parliament. What transpired in the UK was interesting because BBC essentially moved the employee status to contractors, and therefore the contractors then could bill those services to the BBC via the limited company, not only reducing their own tax liabilities, but also the tax liability of the BBC. So that's in a crux to show you that
so
this is not
unique. If I was to really simplify it, employees were shown as contractors, so that both of them saved on taxes. If I am to understand correctly, Adit, eventually a few of these people even went to court and lost their cases. Isn't that right?
That's correct. They were some of the most prominent media presenters, and it became headlines for a good couple of years, because that battle was going on for a very long time. And this is not something new to the BBC. The BBC has been subjected to tax misappropriation for a very, very long time. And in fact, UPA regime, Tehseen will correct us when he does jump on the mic. Twice they were sent similar notices. Of course, the notices were then squashed by the Supreme Court. Okay. So let the process take place even now. Okay,
so we'll just leave the UP aside for a bit. Let's just look at sovereign countries trying to apply their law even-handedly to organizations even-handedly. I apologize, Professor Manojit Mandal. Thank you very much for joining us here from the TMC. Before I come to you, Professor Mandal, I want to ask one last question to Adit Kothari. At the time when the BBC was probed and found guilty of tax evasion, were they writing some anti-establishment stories against the government in UK, which is why the government went after them in this horrible witch hunt?
Well, the thing is, we can say that, but we all know that at this point, whatever the opposition is doing at the point, they should hire me as a strategist, because they're causing irreparable damage to their own cause by supporting a hit job by the BBC, who hired questionable journalists from The Wire, from The Caravan, from Al Jazeera. Only provides ammunition to the BJP at the end of the day.
Okay. So, Mandal, one, you have an open offer from Adit Kothari to hire him as your PR representative. And two, if the BBC was investigated and found guilty by their own country, then why should India also not apply its law? Again, I'm saying this is not about predetermining guilt. They may well come out unscathed. But if the UK can subject them to scrutiny, why shouldn't India?
It's happening only after this documentary was shown. Did it happen 1 month ago, 2 months ago? So the people are not, fool. You can't really fool people by your political rhetoric or articulate speech, homemade speech, and saying that I am an expert on everything under the sun. For God's sake, we do not need your advice at all. The fact remains that in this country, not just BBC, even in the other media, I name one particular channel, a very small channel, Calcutta, named Kolkata TV. They were hounded out for 7-8 days and a year ago, and till date nothing happened. Precisely because they were not towing the line of the BJP. The only channel in Calcutta, perhaps, not really towing the line of BJP was hounded out 1 year back. The CRPF, the IT people, they were all, sitting in that particular office. Was it happening only because it is a simple tax raids? Or
I will ask that question to Sanju Verma. I will ask that question to Sanju Verma from the BBC in Delhi to Kolkata TV in Kolkata. All of them followed to a pattern. But Professor Mandal, you still haven't answered. All right. So the BBC is surveyed in India because of India a Modi question. Why was the BBC surveyed in the UK and found guilty?
No. I mean, please ask her not to laugh like that.
Please.
I
Okay.
tell you.
Okay, one at a time. Let's not get into tutu meme. Yes.
I give an example.
Why
it's
was it
about
surveyed in the UK?
muzzling the voice of the opposition.
Sir, I'm asking about
Right?
the UK.
Not just BBC.
All right. Everything that happens in India is to
BJP
muzzle the opposition. But I am asking you a simple question. The UK has done the same thing. Carried out a survey and found them guilty. Why would they do that? Why would they do that?
I'm not concerned with what is happening in London or UK. I'm concerned with what is happening in my country, in my
sir,
state.
if you are concerned about the British Broadcasting Corporation, then you should be equally concerned about what's happening in Britain. Because you are concerned about the Broadcasting Corporation, so you might as well be concerned about the country itself.
Son was not spared for the last 2-3 years, and you are saying that this is routine raiding. You are saying this is routine raiding? Only the opposition leaders, and when the BJP leaders are taking money on TV, they are being spared. There is not a single raid on Adani's offices.
All right,
what happened with
let's right now restrict ourselves. Kolkata TV to BBC all follows to a pattern. Sanju Verma.
Cherubim dropping from the sky.
I refuse to speak unless this man is asked to keep quiet.
Okay, one at a time, please, sir. I'm asking you a question. Kolkata TV to BBC. Sanju Verma, answer.
Padmaja, I will answer your question, but I also have to say this. The attitude of the opposition reminds me of that famous Hindi muhavra, Khisyani Billi Khamba Noche. Point number one, do you remember a gentleman called Ambikesh Mahapatro? I've even tweeted about it today. He was arrested in 2012 for simply forwarding a cartoon, which had Mamata Banerjee in it. He lost 11 precious years of his life and became a free man only as recently as January 2023. Do you remember your Mamata Banerjee in 2016-17 changing Ram Navami into Ranga Navami, Ram Bhumi into Ranga Bhumi? So please don't sit here and lecture on free press, freedom of speech. It's the height of mendacity. Now, a very interesting point which I need to focus on is that was the survey at BBC's Mumbai and Delhi offices a retribution for the Modi question, the so-called documentary, which I believe is complete piece of trash, but be that as it may, was it a case of retribution on the part of the Modi government? The simple logic is this, and I challenge anyone to challenge my facts. The survey was conducted wide Article 132 and 133A of the Income Tax Act of 1961. These are the two sections or articles, what you will, which the income tax officials use when they have to carry out a survey, and an aggravated version is obviously called a raid. But before carrying out a survey under section 132 or 133, before carrying out a raid, the income tax department gives anywhere between a month, largely it is 2 months, before they actually enter your offices and ask for information, seize your laptops or seize your mobile phones, what you will.
Okay.
The BBC controversy hit Indian shores in and around the 22nd and 23rd of Jan 2023. But going by past convention, the manner in which surveys are done by Income Tax Department in the last 60, 70 odd years, the fact is that the Section 142(1) notice by the Income Tax Department pertaining to tax concealment, tax evasion, income concealment must have been sent to the BBC India's office at least mid-December 2022, at least a month before the so-called BBC documentary hit Indian shores.
Are you absolutely confirming the fact that in December 2022 this notice was sent to the BBC?
Yes, I am saying exactly that. Section 142(1) notice has to go from the income tax authorities.
Okay.
Without a section
so, Tehsil
142(1)
Poonawalla, then the timeline doesn't add up. The timeline doesn't add up because if the documentary is what precipitated the survey, then Sanju Verma's argument is the notice before the survey was preceding the documentary.
Section 142 notice of the Income Tax Act for concealment of income.
Okay, Tehsil Poonawalla. So the order was notice, documentary, survey. Tehsil Poonawalla.
BBC knew that, they are going to be surveyed.
So, okay, let him respond, please. Let him respond.
Let her only talk.
Okay, go on, Tehsil Poonawalla. Your timeline is not adding up. Tehsil Poonawalla.
Says who? Says who? It's not adding up.
Says actually the IT department as well.
Ask them to put
where
a
they
notice
are saying that we have multiple notices which have been served on the BBC and they have persistently not complied or responded. Hence the survey was done.
So see, this 142 notice is not something that is out of the woods. It's something that is sent to a lot of people, a lot of organizations. That's fine. So if a notice is sent and if the IT has any concrete evidence that BBC has not replied, ask them to put that out in public domain. They're being clever by half. They're saying, okay, we sent a 142 notice in December, November, have what may you 2002, 2003. That's not the Padmaja, I cannot,
Okay,
Padmaja, I cannot
please,
really
one at a time.
debate.
Put out
If
the
I knew
notice
this was
that you
going to be
have.
the
Finish
show,
your
I wouldn't
point. Go
have
on.
come. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Padmaja, I'll leave. No, it doesn't make sense, na, Padmaja. We are respected guests. You've called us on the show. You got to moderate it, yaar. Thanks. Can I just make my points?
Yes, go on, please.
Thank you, Padmaja. Look, 142 is not the question. Thank you so much. 142 is not the question. They've sent a 142. Let the IT department put out evidence on your show exclusively that they didn't reply to it. Because when 142 comes, any chartered accountant replies to it. That's standard procedure. This is all nonsense. The fact is somebody is misleading the most honorable Prime Minister. The fact about it is nobody would have taken cognizance of that documentary, 22nd, 23rd Jan when it came out, until somebody in the Prime Minister's office or somebody trying to please the most honorable Prime Minister decided to go hammer and tongs after it and decided to ban it. That created a reaction. People started watching this documentary. Now when minds had gone away from this documentary, suddenly you've gone out and done this whole IT survey under some pretext of 142, which is a norm, which so many people get a
But
142.
going by your
so
own
many
logic, Tehsil Poonawalla, if you think that going after the BBC is damaging the BJP, why would they do it? That they are highlighting a documentary which is damaging to their reputation.
Because
No, Padmaja, this can't.
I'll agree. I'll answer that. Because the BJP and the most honorable Prime Minister is being misled. They don't realize that you cannot ban something on the internet.
Okay,
they do
hold
not
on.
realize
First, let's
that
take
the minute
question
you
number
go
one.
after
Sanju
somebody with a hammer
Verma,
and
all
tongs,
of this notice, etc., is all hogwash. If you have proof, put it out. Show when the notice was sent with the date. Show it. Put it out in the public domain.
Padmaja, I'm not surprised anymore. I'm amused.
142,
Tehsil Poonawalla, please, now you shut up and listen. Stop
Okay, language,
whining and
please.
sulking. No, because, I'm done with the lies by this man. He comes here, he has no idea about the topic. He starts
Can we please come to the point? Please, let's stick to the topic.
So
Go
let
on.
me come to the point. Let me come to the point. The point is this, please check. Go to the ROC website. In the ROC website, you will find out that BBC Global India Private Limited and its other subsidiaries that function in India, they were registered on the 15th of October, 1998. The last audited balance sheet of BBC, despite ROC sending them so many reminders, was dated March 2021. They had an AGM in September 2021. After that, they have not come out in the public domain with an audited balance sheet or an audited profit and loss account statement, which is enough reason for the income tax authorities to not only conduct a survey but a raid. I challenge you to tell me.
The question here was about the notice. Now let me come to point number 2. The challenge being extended to you is, what about the notices? If such notices exist and they have been given, they should be put out in the public domain. Let me bring in Dr. Naval Kishore as well. It's interesting that today people who are talking about censorship, Dr. Naval Kishore, here a statement signed by 41 Congress MPs accused the BBC of broadcasting notoriously anti-India stories and asked the government to not allow the BBC to report again from Indian soil. This is as far as the Congress is concerned. Then we also had the BBC, in fact, being banned during the Congress. Indira Gandhi in the early 70s expelled the BBC for 2 years from the country for broadcasting 2 documentaries, Calcutta and Phantom India. And finally, in 87, you also had the offices of the Indian Express raided, Dr. Naval Kishore. So at that time, if all of this passes for process of law, why is it considered persecution now? Dr. Naval Kishore.
देखिए पद्मजा जी, ये बहुत ही आसान तरीका है। इतिहास में जाकर वर्तमान के सारे डिक्टेटोरियल टेंडेंसी, जितने भी तानाशाही एक्ट हैं, उन सबको सही ठहराने का जो काम आपने लिया है या जो आपने एजेंडा बनाया है, वो पूरे भाजपा के गलतियों को सही ठहराने के लिए आप पूरा काम करते हैं। और वह पूरा एक तर्क ऐसा करते हैं कि बीजेपी ने जो किया वो नॉर्मल है, वो 70 सालों से होता चला आ रहा है।
बिल्कुल भी नहीं। आपसे सिंपल सवाल मेरा ये है कि अगर जो 87 में हुआ वो सही था, तो अभी जो हो रहा है वो भी सही होगा, या फिर अभी जो हो रहा है अगर वो डिक्टेटोरियल है तो 87 में भी वो डिक्टेटोरियल था, या फिर अगर जो यूके में हुआ है वो भी डिक्टेटोरियल है, जो यूके की सरकार कर रही है।
पद्मजा जी, वही बात तो मैं कह रहा हूं कि अगर आपसे 2002 दंगों की बात की जाएगी तो 1984 में चले जाएंगे, 1947 में चले जाएंगे, इतिहास में चले जाएंगे। जो अभी हो रहा है
सर, जो अभी हो रहा है, चलिए आप बीजेपी को छोड़ दीजिए, बीजेपी जो कर रही है वो टोटली डिक्टेटोरियल है। आप ये बताइए कि यूके की सरकार अपने ही चैनल के खिलाफ इन्वेस्टिगेशन अगर कर रही है, क्या वो भी डिक्टेटोरियल है या फिर वो न्याय संगत है? इज दैट लॉफुल?
नहीं, वो हो सकता है गलत हो, वो भी वहां के लोग बोलेंगे ना, वो भी गलत होगा अगर होगा तो। जो यहाँ पे हो रहा है, और आपने पिछले 8 साल में नहीं देखा है कि भाजपा के शासन करने का, सत्ता करने का तरीका क्या है। आपने जब ये देखा कि जो बीजेपी ने या मोदी जी ने जो किया गुजरात के समय में, और वो अगर डॉक्यूमेंट्री के स्तर पे तो उसको देखने भी नहीं दिया जाता है। आप देखने क्यों नहीं देते हैं? आपको क्यों डर लगता है कि डॉक्यूमेंट्री देखकर लोग भाजपा और देश विरोधी हो जाएंगे?
Okay.
इतना डरते क्यों हैं?
When you come up with a ban followed by the survey, then naturally it is suspicious. Sanju Verma, those are the dots that are joined.
Okay, पद्मजा जी, ये जो महाशय आरजेडी से यहाँ बैठकर बीजेपी को फ्री स्पीच पर भाषण दे रहे थे, इनके खुद के नेता लालू प्रसाद यादव, अभी आप चुप रहिए, मैंने आपको टोका नहीं, चुप हो जाइए। मैं आए पद्मजा?
एक एक करके सर, प्लीज आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन एंड आई एम कमिंग बैक टू यू नवल किशोर जी।
Your Supremo Lalu Prasad Yadav was convicted in the fodder scam by the Supreme Court. Despite that, you guys keep eulogizing him as just a man next to Raja Harishchandra. इसलिए यहाँ बैठकर आपका भाषण देना तो बिल्कुल बनता नहीं है। Let me also remind you, victim card अभी आप खेलोगे, अभी तो पिक्चर बाकी है। In October 2022, your Tejasvi Yadav was called by the CBI in the land for job scam, and if found guilty, he will go behind bars. I'm saying that to you today. So get ready to play the victim card.
बदतमीजों का झुंड है भाजपा।
तैयारी करिए।
अरे भाजपा बदतमीजों का झुंड है। आपको पता है कि सारे बदतमीज भाजपा में है। उनसे पूछा जाएगा लालू यादव, अरे कौन सा जंगल राज है उत्तर प्रदेश में 2 साल तक पत्रकार को जेल में रखते हो, जेल में। आपका जवाब दिया जा चुका है, जवाब दिया। आपको हिम्मत है बोलने का, आपको हिम्मत है बोलने का कि नारी
स्टेट एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर are being caught with live cartridges at an airport. So stop giving lectures
Okay, Dr. Naval Kishore, let him finish his point. Dr. Naval Kishore.
What is this nonsense? Is it on the topic? Can you challenge? आपने लालू यादव यहाँ टॉपिक में है, शिक्षा मंत्री टॉपिक में है, आप बताइए ना, बीबीसी पे डिबेट करा रहे हैं, and she is going on speaking nonsense. She is speaking continuously nonsense. She is speaking continuously nonsense, and you cannot dare to challenge.
I unfortunately have lost the video link with Dr. Naval Kishore as well. I'm going to give the final word to Adit Kothari. Adit Kothari, irrespective of whatever the facts may be, the general impression, given the timing, given the fact that there is already a ban, would you think that overall the messaging has come out very problematic, if not suspicious?
Padmaja, the problem is if you're going to question the timing about this particular IT survey, then you cannot not question, what essentially transpired in terms of the BBC documentary. Why did it come out in 2023 all of a sudden, after 20 odd years of the incident in Gujarat? And that also, it's not an objective report that's been published. So my essentially question to the people questioning this particular move when this, what the Modi government has gone after the BBC is are you questioning the judgment that the Supreme Court has essentially provided? The pot calling the kettle black. I mean, we had the gentleman from TMC questioning Prime Minister Modi and the BJP, etc. Have you seen their conduct in West Bengal with Professor Mahapatro and the other gentleman?
Okay.
That was essentially jailed.
Okay. Again, this is that vicious cycle where we go down into a circle of what about it. And every time you have got politics entering episodes like this, where the law is being applied or it is being used as a hammer against opponents, then the discourse gets irretrievably muddled as well. For now, of course, the government says they will come up with a statement or they will come up with a fact-finding on what has been recovered from the searches. That will be under huge scrutiny. Waiting for that. For the time being, gentlemen, and Sanju Verma, thanks for joining me.